Well, good evening, everyone. Before we get in the general committee, we did meet in closed session downstairs. I'm going to have Mayor McGarry just finish that off, and then we'll go into general committee. Mayor McGarry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, Councillor Wolf, I think you have the motion.
Yes, I do. Motion through me and seconded by Councillor Montero. Council to rise from closed session. The Council rise from closed session and reconvene in open session.
Thank you very much. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? And that motion's carried. Councillor Devine, you have the motion regarding introductions and considerations of bylaws.
Yes, introduction and consideration of bylaws. Being bylaw of the Corporation of City of Cambridge, we exempt certain lots or blocks pursuant to section 50, bracket 5 of the Planning Act, as amended, part lot exception, 600 Myers Road. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Councillor Liggett, you have the confirmatory bylaw.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Devine as printed.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Montero, you have the motion to close the meeting.
I do move by myself, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that special council meeting adjourns at 7:12.
Okay. And all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. And I now hand the mic over to Councillor Ermetta. Chair.
Well, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get right into general committee. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Oh, I have Councillor Leggett. Did you want to say something? Your name is on my screen. No? Okay. So I'm going to call up our first delegation, Marilyn Scott for Blue Huron Ridge. Welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Ermetta, Mayor McGarry, councillors, including regional councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Before I commence, I'd like to express condolences to Rick Cowsell's family, friends, and former colleagues on council. He served on behalf of the public for many years, and that is appreciated and noted. Thank you for affording us, oh, by the way, for the record, I have a full presentation with complete contact information. The name's Marilyn Scott, address 201 Blue Heron Ridge. So, thank you for affording us the opportunity to appear at General Committee this evening. I'm here representing the residents of the Blue Heron Ridge neighborhood and wish to express our concerns about the escalating threats to our immediate surroundings. Neighborhood. As councillors, you understand very well the importance of neighborhood to the fabric of the wider community. Neighborhood isn't just its geographical limits, but a dynamic place of social interactions. It's personal. It's where we raise our kids, walk our dogs, maybe chat over the fence or pitch in to help and appreciate our surroundings. It's our home and contributes to our sense of well-being. The Blue Heron Ridge neighborhood, once farmland and countryside, is wonderfully situated, almost in the geographic center of the city and enveloped on the southwest by the Grand, a nationally designated heritage river, and Dumfries Park to the northeast. It's got a true sense of place, characterized by its rural feel in the heart of the city. No sidewalks, no curbs, nor gutters, a variety of very old and established trees, and an abundance of wildlife, birds especially. In fact, these attributes are noted in the Cambridge Heritage Master Plan of 2008, prepared for the City of Cambridge by Carl Bray, Bray Associates. To underscore the description which you have in front of you, I quote, "Heritage character. This rural suburb is an oasis located just off the main highway along the east bank of the Grand River, sandwiched between the Galt Country Club and the Dumfries Conservation Area. It has a decidedly non-urban character and an orientation towards the golf course and the river below the bluff on which the houses sit. It developed in the 20th century and thus contains good examples of residential architecture from that period, including 2 architecturally significant houses." There are character-defining elements listed in the report: rural road cross-sections, large houses set back from the road on large lots, informal road patterns, gravel driveways, and woodland setting. Friends and neighbors here this evening, and those unable to join us, treasure the Blue Heron Ridge neighborhood and are seeking Council's help to halt the impending threats we are now facing. Carl Bray's master plan anticipated over a decade ago just this scenario in their report. The paragraph, "Conservation and Development Concerns and Opportunities." This area is vulnerable to intrusions from more development if the large lots are subdivided, and from the public works that would install urban standard curbs and gutters and remove trees. Also of concern is the potential for construction of a bridge across the river near this area, although the proposal now appears to be in abeyance. To address these and other impacts of urban intensification guidelines for conservation of existing character may be required. Well, it's no longer may be required. Protections are urgently required, as right now trees are coming down, lots are being subdivided, and disproportionately scaled new builds are dwarfing their immediate neighbors. Third-story balconies and windows mean all privacy is lost, and as noted, the area is vulnerable. We'd like to emphasize that we're not opposed to all development. The oldest property still standing was built in 1870, the newest in 2018. There's a wide variety of housing styles and assessed values, with early 20s and 30s cottages and bungalows, post-war and mid-century ranch styles, several listed cultural assets, a house designed by nationally renowned architect Arthur Erickson, and Hilborn House, built for PR, that is Percy Hilborn, and onto larger homes, some built since Y2K. As residents and neighbors, we know that development and infill have been woven into the fabric of this small community for decades. But with Council's help, we envision these newly intrusive developments to be respectful and reinforce rather than detract from the character-defining elements as noted earlier. We are looking to Council to resolve this 11-year-old unfinished business from the Heritage Master Plan and implement protection from further incursions. We appreciate ours is not the only neighborhood that is vulnerable to disruptive and inappropriate development abetted by severances. We understand that city staff are reviewing zoning bylaws in general and that there will be updates in June, and look forward to specific improvements as they relate to the Blue Heron Ridge neighborhood. 40-foot lots were never intended for this district, but are being approved because of a relic from decades ago, the plan of subdivision, that pulls rank on the bylaw that would foster development that is respectful of this defined character area. The height and volume will have a neighborhood-wide impact on this site. As residents, we're looking to council and staff to help us to safeguard the distinctive nature of this neighborhood by deploying any and all planning tools and appropriate mechanisms that are reasonable, effective, and expeditious. Even pushing the pause button would help. We are respectfully requesting halt the 2 building permit applications for 295 Blue Heron Ridge, 105 Pheasant Avenue, and any other applications which have not come to our attention. Stop the clock to prevent further damage while a new bylaw is being put in place. Enact an interim control bylaw for the area pursuant to Section 38 of the Planning Act. Halt any consents, minor variances, or rezonings from occurring, at least until further study has been completed. Since the numerous lots were not merged on title as intended, enact a deeming bylaw pursuant to Section 50.4 of the Planning Act to merge the relevant whole lots in this area so that if the owners want to sever them, the property owner would have to go through the consent process. What measures can council take to set a maximum house height so a new house will blend in and maintain adjoining neighbors' privacy? Mitigate window and door openings and especially overhanging balconies from 3rd floors? Ensure the corner 3-story house proposed for Pinewood Avenue be oriented to face Blue Heron Ridge and not present the exception of an inappropriate mass parallel to the street. Establish a maximum size for a house on a 40-foot lot, R3 zoning. Knowing that this is a budget matter, we also request to be included in the city's next budget round for funds to be allocated to a Heritage Conservation District study. Thank you. It is regrettable and the community's loss that the conservation safeguards that were recommended over a decade ago have not been heeded and implemented. The existing neighborhood character was vulnerable then and considerably more so now. We appreciate the assistance that staff and council have provided, especially our ward councillor, Jan Liggett. Now it's time for some loopholes to be closed and protections put in place. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions should you have them.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members of the committee? Councillor Liggett?
I believe, Mr. Chair, that there is a meeting planned between staff and the Neighborhood Association for Thursday.
Correct.
Correct. And that I believe that staff is coming before council with a report on neighborhood zonings, correct? In June?
It's June the 11th, I believe, that meeting, right?
June the 11th.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm wondering if your neighborhood group, after they've met with staff, and I will be at that meeting, but if after they've met and what comes before us in June, if you would be take in that time the consideration of whether you want it to go through a Heritage District plan study, or whether you are comfortable with what staff brings before us. Have you talked about that as a group, or?
As a group, we have not, but we are certainly looking for advice and we'll take direction on the options open to us.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps with staff on Thursday, the pros and cons of all of that could be brought forward and you would be more comfortable making that type of a decision before we go through the process of putting that into possibility of going into the budget?
We would very much welcome that input from staff.
Okay.
and council as well.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, I'm wondering at what point would they come back to us to tell us what it is that they would prefer? How do we as a council get that?
Staff would like to comment. I'm going to hand the floor to them.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Elaine.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The meeting that's being referred to is the public meeting for the citywide zoning bylaw. And one of the issues that we heard during preparation of the bylaw is that there are a number of established neighborhoods. We recognize that. And so we have identified specific neighborhoods throughout the city of Cambridge and come up with some very specified zoning standards to deal with new development in those areas. So the information that will be shared on June the 11th applies to the entire city, but it also includes a section of standards for Blue Heron Ridge. So the residents in that particular neighborhood have an opportunity to and are welcome to provide us with some feedback and comments about the regulations that have been sent to them already. We can have further discussion with representatives from the Neighborhood Association on Thursday when we have the meeting. Thank you.
Jan?
Thank you,
Or
Mr.
Council-
Chair.
Councillor Leggett, I mean.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. When this comes back, my goodness, I don't even know how to word this. I want to make sure that any of the building permit applications that are going forward, if they are already out there, do we know of them? And is there danger to this community at this point in time more than what we already know about? Or are you able to tell us that, staff?
Yeah, I'll hand that back to staff. Or Dennis is coming to the podium.
Through you, Chair. There is currently 2 building permits in the building division right now under review. We have not issued those permits as of yet.
Would there be anything that would postpone those at this point, or it's just proceeding through the system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is proceeding through the normal process. It has been through an initial review. We have noted a number of deficiencies in terms of the building code, and so that has been relayed back to the applicant, and we anticipate it'll probably be at least a couple of weeks before they sufficiently address those deficiencies.
Okay, so will this, the representative from this group be notified as to when that's all done and through so that they're aware? Can we let them know when that's all approved?
Typically, we don't communicate where we are in the process with that.
No, I mean after it's approved, that it's done.
After the permit is approved?
Yes.
Once the building permit is approved, it is a public document.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wolf?
I actually have a question for, through you, Mr. Chair, for Dennis. Is it possible for us to do, well, first of all, for these building permits, are these for 3-story buildings? Like, could we, are we able to do, let's say, limit the height when you're in the middle of the process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, part of the building permit process review would be a zoning review, and the zoning review would capture that information as if it complies with the zoning bylaw. So the height restrictions are covered under the zoning bylaw. So if it is within the zoning bylaw as it stands today, and it complies, then it will be cleared.
So it's too late for us to change the zoning bylaw for this building, if we wanted to say it could only be a 2-story building?
It's deep in the process at this point, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Devine?
Marilyn, I'm just curious, how many people do you have here from your group, from your neighborhood association?
Could I ask them to just raise their hand,
Sure.
please?
Okay, thank you.
My neighbors.
I see no further questions. So at this point, we've made note of your comments, and staff will review that, and it'll come at the next meeting.
Okay,
And,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I'm sure we'll keep you informed in the process.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Thank you for coming out, and we do appreciate hearing from the neighborhood, and it's great that you're showing ownership in your community, so thank you again.
Good, thank you. And for the page, I have the presentation.
That would be great, thank you. I was just going through my notes. I want to acknowledge that Councillor Kiefer and Councillor Jowett from the region of Waterloo are representatives. They are here. I also would like to do a moment of silence for the former Councillor Rick Kelsall, if we could all bow our heads. Thank you, everyone. I'll just call a brief recess, and then we're going to proceed with the rest of our agenda. welcome back, everyone. I'm going to call up Shannon Noonan, Manager of Transportation Engineering, for the presentation. Welcome.
So I don't get them mixed up with my stuff. Okay. I think so, yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council, staff, and members of the audience. Tonight we'll be presenting to you the city's first transportation master plan, referred to as Moving Cambridge. A transportation master plan considers high-level transportation needs in a strategic manner by defining how a city's transportation system will grow and change in the coming decades. It is an opportunity to review the current state of transportation, analyze the overall transportation system, and develop a long-term vision for transportation, resulting in a high-level document similar to an official plan. Before you tonight, Council, you have a brochure that has been created with the purpose of distilling the overall plan, which is about 300 pages, including all supporting reports, into a quick reference document for you. I believe that you do have it in front of you. Is that correct? Yes? Okay. As we go through the presentation, you can follow the same topics through the brochure. So what is Moving Cambridge? What is the plan? The plan is a guiding document identifying the policies and projects required to create the transportation system of the future. It's forecast to 2041 and will be used to inform transportation aspects of the next official plan update. It has been 2 years, over 2 years actually, in the making, and included 3 public consultation centers and was completed in conjunction with the region's transportation master plan update. So what's going on in the city today? We're growing, as I think most of us can see. Compared to 2016, by 2031, we are expected to have 20% more people living in the city and 52% more people working in the city. We're also aging, with 18% of the city's population expected to be over the age of 65 by 2031. So why does age matter? It matters because seniors are particularly vulnerable to isolation if they don't have access to a range of accessible, affordable, and appropriate transportation options to support active and healthy living. So even though 80% of trips people are making are within the region, and the majority of those are within the city, most of them are happening by car, setting us up for busier roads and future congestion. So how do we mitigate this? I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Scott Johnston from IBI, our consultant who's been working on this project, to discuss our challenges and recommended solutions.
Thank you, Shannon. To develop the TMP, we explored how the city would work under different scenarios. 3 scenarios were evaluated to identify the best course of action for the city in terms of transportation investment. A do-nothing scenario explores what would happen if the city did not invest in roads and active transportation. Scenario 1, support growth, explores what if the city invested targeted improvements in the road network where needed and where feasible, and also expands the active transportation network. Scenario 2 limits road capacity and focuses investment on active transportation only. The TMP evaluated these scenarios using the city's goals and objectives and found that scenario 1 was recommended as it provides a balanced approach that best meets the city's vision. This is a map that shows what would happen under the do-nothing scenario. The map is the same information as page 3 of your brochure, although the format is different. The map shows that under this scenario, congestion becomes worse in the city, both in where it occurs and how long it occurs. In addition to congestion, doing nothing means that the city would not realize benefits of active transportation and transit, such as benefits of health and sustainability. These next slides show what the support growth scenario looks like. Recommendations were developed for active transportation, roads, and transit, and this map shows the recommendations for active transportation. The TMP recommends that the city fill in gaps and expand the active transportation network, improve the quality of facilities such as trails, paths, bike lanes, and sidewalks, create a trail spine along the rivers, create more connections across barriers such as the river and highways, integrate the active transportation network with neighboring municipalities, and prioritize active transportation in developments surrounding the LRT corridor, shown in blue on the map. This slide shows what the support growth looks like in terms of recommended road improvements. The TMP plans to 2041, and road projects were categorized into short, medium, and long-term projects. Overall, the TMP recommends 12 corridor capacity and 6 intersection improvements at strategic locations. The map has the recommended improvements categorized by color to horizon, and the blue lines show regional projects on regional roads under the jurisdiction of the region. The city does not operate transit, but the TMP also provided recommendations for transit in terms of policy and staff directions. The TMP recommends the city support the GRT 5-year plan as it has improvements to service and new routes, including new express routes in the city. It recommends that, to encourage GRT to fill gaps in the priority transit network in the long term. And it advocates for interregional transit connections, including GO Rail. The map shows 2 conceptual goal alignments on the Milton CP line and the Fergus subdivision. The TMP also reviewed a number of policies and programs to ensure development, construction, and day-to-day operations align with the long-term vision of the plan. I'll hand it over to Shannon again to walk through the recommendations.
So overall, 9 supporting strategies were developed as part of the Transportation Master Plan. The first one is Transportation Demand Management. Transportation demand management is the reduction and redistribution of travel to maximize resources. It focuses on balancing the transportation system by reducing the number of car trips through walking, cycling, transit, and alternative commuting such as carpooling or working from home. The TDM supporting strategy identifies staffing resources, TDM requirements for development, and partnerships as priorities to facilitate a shift towards more sustainable travel. New mobility. In this digital age, we are experiencing rapidly changing technology. It is important that we adapt to accommodate new technologies like electric vehicles and Uber, as well as prepare for the new ones we know are coming, like driverless vehicles. New mobility is now part of the municipal transportation portfolio, requiring monitoring of technological developments, potentially regulating these technologies, and incorporating them into our standards. Traffic safety. Traffic safety and collision prevention has always been a priority, but it is a function of technologies that can continually be improved upon. In conjunction with the Transportation Master Plan, our existing traffic safety program has been reviewed to validate the safety performance indexes, as well as identify any potential for improvement in the overall program. The strategy also recommends scheduled reviews and updates of the program and the review of city design standards for the incorporation of new traffic safety features. Active transportation network maintenance. In order to be a reliable means of travel and recreation, the active transportation network requires consistent year-round maintenance. Year-round maintenance of bike lanes and sidewalks was provincially legislated last year. It is recommended that this be applied to the trail system as well, and that a system be established for the routine inspection and maintenance of the off-road transportation network, similar to the existing road patrol system. Core area parking. Currently, parking in the downtown core areas is operated out of sync with the strategic objectives of the city, particularly with respect to intensification and sustainability. The core areas parking strategy recommends updating and implementing the 2009 Core Areas Parking Master Plan, with the general objectives of providing the parking required to support a robust downtown area without promoting car travel as a cheap and a convenient alternative to active transportation and transit. This can be accomplished in part by moving towards a predominantly paid parking system. Substandard rights-of-way. Cambridge is a historic area with many neighborhoods planned and built for a very different transportation system than what we have today. We want to provide consistent, modern transportation facilities across all areas of the city while preserving the nature of each neighborhood. The existing standardized cross-sections for substandard right-of-ways have been updated to incorporate cycling facilities where required and accessible pedestrian facilities. The substandard rights-of-way strategy has assigned appropriate cross-sections to each substandard section of road in the city to ensure consistent application as individual sections are reconstructed. Traffic calming. When warranted, traffic calming can improve the operations of a road and thereby improve the livability of the neighborhood. Our existing traffic calming policy and process is unnecessarily complex. Streamlining the process, clearly identifying warrant requirements and the responsibilities of all parties will create a more user-friendly program for both residents and staff. In addition to updating the reactive traffic calming program, the traffic calming strategy recommends adopting specific requirements for traffic calming features in new developments. Goods movement. Goods movement is an essential service that must be accommodated into any transportation network. However, heavy truck traffic can be disruptive to the community. In order to improve the movement and delivery of goods, it is recommended that all streets in industrial subdivisions be designated as heavy truck routes and that a permissive truck routing be adopted to guide truck drivers along the best roads in the city. The opening of the first segment of the South Boundary Road will create a high-capacity connection between Highway 24 south of the city and Franklin Boulevard, facilitating a bypass of through truck traffic around the Galt core, which the strategy recommends to improve the downtown pedestrian environment. However, in the interim, staff will discuss other potential bypass routes or initiatives with the Region of Waterloo that could be implemented before completion of the South Boundary Road. Road classification. The city currently classifies roads as arterial, collector, and local, but does not apply criteria to those definitions. Additionally, in some subdivisions, road classes were never officially assigned. The road classification strategy has defined the intended functions of each road class in terms of network connectivity, design speed, and volume, as well as the appropriate characteristics such as pedestrian and cycling facilities. The criteria was further refined to establish different expectations for residential-type roads versus commercial or industrial roads. The strategy also recommends dividing the collector road class into major and minor, reflective of significant differences in function across the city's collector road network. These new road classes were then assigned to the network based on the criteria established. Having explicitly defined road class criteria supports network planning for general traffic, goods movement, transit, and active transportation. So implementing the plan. Investing early in getting cars off the road through transportation demand management, active transportation, and transit reduces the long-term financial, environmental, and social costs of the transportation network. Improving the road network to support future demand will require an estimated average of $7.5 million per year in capital projects. As a growing city, operating budgets for transportation facilities must increase as new facilities come online. We also want to use the supporting strategies that were just described to operate effectively in line with the objectives of the plan. And we want to review the plan about every 5 years to continue meeting the current and future needs of the city. So we are asking for council tonight to endorse the transportation master plan as presented.
Well, thank you, Shannon. I've got a few questions. Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you to Ms. Noonan. I know that I'm not the only one, all of us councillors, I'm sure, have had our constituents complain about the number of speeders on their streets. And so I find that traffic calming is one of the issues that is going to be really important in this. And I wondered if you could pull out a little more and describe a little more about what we can do around traffic calming and what the neighborhoods themselves could also do to help reduce the number of speeders on our street.
Thank you. Through the chair, this document is a very high-level document, so it doesn't get into the detailed specifics of traffic calming. It just has some general recommendations of what we could do with our traffic calming program, such as updating our policies as described earlier. But I can say that the transportation section is working on other initiatives that relate to traffic calming, and that will be coming before council at a later date.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Shannon, when I look at page 5 of this brochure and I look at where you have number C or letter C, you're talking about the Main Street and Shade Street intersection for 2031, 2041. But we're working on that this year, all of Main Street to the bottom of that hill. So is that intersection itself not being done?
As part of the TMP, basically we identified those intersections as capacity improvements at an intersection level for the long term. So it would be in addition to what is being done in the short term.
So you're excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm having difficulty hearing you for one thing, but so you're saying again in 2031 we're going to relook at that for the numbers?
Mr. Chair, I believe the answer is yes. So the TMP recommends that those become more congested and more constrained in the long term, and that they get looked at again in the long term with targeted capacity improvements.
Okay, that's good to hear, because there's about 600 new residences going in on Shade Street, probably starting next year. Can I have another question, please, Mr. Chair? When I look at page 46 and 47 of our agenda, it talks about that the moving forward is, with this is having appropriate staff within the organization to implement the plan. And then under financial implications, it says there is no immediate financial commitment. But it would seem to me in order to do this, we'd have to have at least one new hire, or are you going to be doing this with the staff that's already in existence?
Through the chair, yes, the plan is recommending that we would hire a new FTE, Transportation Demand Management Coordinator. However, that will be included in the 2020 operating budget for consideration. So
that's less than a year. You're looking at hiring somebody for next year then?
Through the chair, yes, that's what we are considering, or that's what we're planning to put forward. However, we could put a recommendation forward sooner if that was desired.
No, not. That's not what I said. I just wanted to know when it's coming, so yeah. I'm aware of that. Okay, thanks, Shannon.
Mayor McGarry.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And it's hard to put that much detail into a brochure like this, and we can all read it, so thank you. In terms of the Southern Boundary Road and the East Boundary Road, when is the timeline for completion estimated on that particular project?
Through the chair, it is a regional project, and it's my understanding that the first segment, which is from Highway 24 to Franklin Boulevard, is scheduled for completion in 2020.
The other one, 22.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report. I know a lot of work went into it. Truck traffic in the downtown core is a major problem. Is there anything you can do before the South Boundary Road is complete?
Through the chair, yes, we are going to have some discussions with the region of Waterloo because the primary roads that go through the Galt core area, Ainsley Street and Water Street, are both regional roads. We will have to discuss with them what other options might be available in advance of the South Boundary Road completion. So we do plan to have those discussions with the region.
And a follow-up? And the other regional road discussion I hope you would have is to have a signal light or a roundabout at George and Blair prior to Cambridge West development coming in, or at least a right turn lane there?
Through the chair, yes, that is on our agenda for discussion with the region as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further questions. So, Councillor Wolf, you've got the motion for item 8. I will let you put that on the floor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Montero. Item 8, moving Cambridge Transportation Master Plan recommendation as printed.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that in reading through this, I was really impressed with the fact that we're getting things all together now, and all of the detail that you provided for us. I really appreciate also this booklet, because it's an easy thing for us to look at, and transportation and everything that goes along with it is probably something that comes before us as councillors more than almost anything else. And so I really wanted to say I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and the cohesion that you bring to all of the issues around this transportation master plan. So thank you for a job well done.
I see no further comments. As the chair, I also would like to echo Councillor Reid's comments as well. It was an excellent report. A lot of work went into it, and I found it very balanced as well. That looking at all forms of transportation and improving that, which is really important, and it's ahead of the curve as well, and it'll help position the city for years to come. So thank you for that. I also wanted to mention too to council that this is the updated copy, not the one in our package, but the one that we received when we all got here. So anyways, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And the motion is carried. Well done. Thank you. Shane Taylor, landscape architect, for item 9, park upgrades or updates. Welcome.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mayor, and members of council, staff, and members of the audience. First off, I just want to apologize. I woke up this morning with this. I don't normally sound this way, so I'll do my best to get through in a clear manner. My name is Shane Taylor. I'm the landscape architect with the Parks Division. I'm presenting this presentation. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to start it. Giving this presentation on behalf of Chris Simsky, Operations Manager with Parks, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here today. He's out of town tonight. I'm also joined by Tricia Lewis, Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture, who can assist with any questions that I struggle with. So the purpose of this presentation today is really just to give you a high-level overview of which projects our Parks Group has on for today. Thank you. I'm not sure it's going to help, but thanks, Van. Really, it's just a high-level overview, just to highlight for you a number of projects we've got on the go for this year. I just want to reiterate, this is not an extensive, exhaustive list. This is just a few projects that we're quite excited about and wanted you to hear a little bit more about. A lot of these projects have some sustainability components to them. operational improvements that assist us with our operations day to day, and some accessibility improvements as well, which is very important these days. I'm also going to talk very briefly about some long-term parks planning projects we've got on the go. So to start it off, West River Walkway lighting improvements. So the plan for this year is to swap out some of the decorative heads that you see before you there on the West River Walkway in downtown Cambridge. Last year with the Craig's Crossing project, we were able to make some improvements to the East Walkway light fixtures. We were able to swap out the heads with new LED heads. So we're quite excited about this. The existing heads are metal halide lights. They do not project light very well. And LED, of course, is much brighter. It's also quite sustainable, less energy output, less dollars spent running the lights. We've been replacing lights for the last number of years in a number of other locations in the city. We've had a lot of positive feedback from residents who now admit to be able to see much better while they're out and about, also from police presence being able to survey areas far more effectively. So we're quite excited about this. The new fixtures will look a lot like these old ones here, obviously updated in black instead of the faded on top. So that should be quite good, and they'll blend in with other upgrades we've done previously. Carrying on the same vein, we have planned to do the same thing here in Soper Park on the pathway system. It's a different style of light. This is what we call a shoebox light, and instead of dispersing light outward, it actually points it downward. So one neat thing about this is that with LED technology these days, we can actually direct our light a lot better. They're much more programmable. So we'll be able to more effectively broadcast light down onto the pathway and not have as much spill out through the rest of the park. So I mean, you can see the waterway here. There'll be less impact on things like birds and fish and whatnot. So we're quite excited about this. We plan to keep doing these as time marches on, but of course we can only do them as budget allows. The next project quickly that I'm going to talk to you about is the Maple Grove Dog Park Improvement Project. Last year, park staff met with some representatives from the dog park group up on Maple Grove. They had a number of concerns with the dog park, including some drainage issues, some fences that weren't securing properly, and one large enclosure, so there was some conflict between larger and smaller dogs. So as a part of the work, so immediately what we did, we jumped in and we made some improvements there on site, including access gates. We fixed some of the water runoff issues between the parking lot and the dog enclosures. And we also fixed some of the lawn, which tends to get worn out from dogs running over it. Since that time, we've continued on adding a gated area, which you can see up in the photo there. We've had some signs made up indicating that larger dogs are in the left enclosure, smaller dogs and puppies are in the right enclosure. They're small changes, but they're quite significant changes, and the groups have been quite pleased with what they've seen so far. Still between now and the end of June, we're going to be making some more improvements, including there's some areas with some standing water within the enclosure. We're going to be draining that out with some weeping tile, adding new tree plantings, which are willows, which also help with the water uptake issues. And we're going to be adding one new in-ground dog waste receptacle, which will bring the total up to 3 units on site. So the new unit will go in the smaller dog enclosure there. And you can see in your report as well, that's a big sustainability movement that we've been introducing lately. The dog waste collected in the units is fed through a biodigester and produces electricity. The 2 units which we already have and which we've had since 2017 have removed the equivalent of 0.33 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. They've powered 6.59 homes for a whole year. They've created enough fertilizer for 0.19 acres of land, and they've removed the equivalent of 0.31 cars off the road for an entire year. So we're quite excited about that. Adding a 3rd unit is obviously just going to increase those numbers as well. The next project quickly is Gouda Place Park Development. So in the fall, and Councillor Adshade actually joined us at this neighborhood consultation meeting, we met with the residents of this small area and discussed what could potentially go forward in the park. We've arrived at a solution, which is a new play structure. I did want to point out, if any of you are familiar with this area, it sits quite high. It's actually quite a unique space. You can see in the aerial photograph, the houses at the bottom of the screen are actually not necessarily larger than the other houses around it. It's just that they're closer to the image. It actually sits very high in the landscape. And so there's quite a beautiful view off this green space, roughly where that red circle's indicated. It's quite stunning, actually. So part of the park design is actually to limit the amount of equipment that's anything that could block the view. It's really more a climbing structure with ropes and metal bars, and colors are chosen to blend in with the landscape. So we're quite happy with how that's going to all play out. It's quite important in terms of accessibility. Again, with all the grade changes, this neighborhood really does need recreational space that they can access, because other parks around are really not accessible by foot. Another project that we're working on is trail bridge replacements throughout different areas of the city, and I'll just quickly go through. There are actually 4 replacements we're going to be looking at. 3 of them are going to be replaced this year, and one of them we're just designing for a future budget year. So 2 of the replacements are on the Mill Run Trail. One is a small structure just off the parking lot at the corner of, I believe that's Clements Ave and Sheffield Street. That's really a maintenance access. The other structure you see on the screen further to the left is quite a large structure. It's about 40 years old and really needs to be replaced quite badly. So we're going to be looking at replacing that this summer. Now, this is quite a heavily used trail, the Mill Run Trail, and it actually runs from Hespeler here all the way underneath the 401 and down to Riverside Park. So a lot of people use this trail, so we're doing our best to make this as minimal of a disruption as we can, but unfortunately we are going to have to close the trail for a number of weeks this summer, so just to make you all aware of that. The other structure we're going to be replacing this year is at the Mill Race Park at the Living Levee, so that's the space right behind LA Franks. That bridge structure is in terrible condition, so we're going to be replacing it this fall. There is some difficulties here in that this space is used quite a bit for weddings. It's also used quite a bit for filming. So we've been coordinating with the booking clerks. We've been coordinating with ECDEV, and we are going to be pulling the structure out on November 1st and then running as quickly as we possibly can to get it done before the snow flies. The final structure we're just designing this year, not replacing, will be at the backside of Riverside Park off of Rogers Drive. So all of these bridge structures, a lot of them were designed prior to AODA coming into effect. So they deal with a lot of steep grades. So in every one of these, we're working quite diligently to improve the accessibility experience on all of these bridges. The last one I wanted to talk to you about involves park planning and operating strategies moving forward. We're looking at undertaking a parkland strategy and master plan starting late this summer and into the fall, which really involves a long-term strategy on how parks develop. We're seeing a lot of development pressure these days, and we feel that it's quite important to have some strong guidelines and strategies in place to address those. And finally, there's a parks asset management plan that's currently underway, which really involves inventorying our current assets, including green infrastructure. So parks, what are in our parks? What do they cost to install initially? How long do they last? When do you need to replace them? And what resources do we need to replace them? So it's really responsible, forward thinking on the operational side. So we're quite excited about that as well. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I've just thrown all the projects we're looking at working on this year up on the slide, so you've got good reference, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I liked some of the detail that you gave in this report, and in particular, I like the fact of going forward, knowing the assets, that we'll be able to tell, so that when it comes to budget time, we already know what we're going to have to repair, the operational costs of those we put in, coming in the future, because I don't think we have a look down at the bigger picture. I don't think we can really see that at budget time, and I find that concerning when we keep putting in new things. I just want to tell you that I appreciate that being part of the new system. My question has to do with the dog parks. We're putting in a lot of buildings that are apartments now, where people don't have access to parks, but yet the dog parks on the periphery of Cambridge. So is there any discussion happening amongst staff about a possible second? And also the units that are used for the feces, are we looking at putting those in our other parks as well?
Thank you. I believe Tricia wants to speak to that one.
Through the chair, Councillor Leggett, these are all very good questions, and that is our reasoning, part of our reasoning and rationale for our Parks Master Plan. We're recognizing the growth and the change, the needs. So this, again, where we can work with that plan, get some input and consultation from the public in terms of future dog parks, and then look at as well opportunities for our dog waste receptacles. They do require a particular amount of volume in terms so that they are effective and don't cause any other issues the opposite way for residential areas. But it is something we're excited to explore, and certainly recognize your question. Thanks.
Mayor McGarry.
And thank you very much. It's a very good report, and I think people are recognizing the value of our parks and our recreation, and this really does fit into making sure that we continue with a vibrant community. And interestingly, to your last point about public consultation, there's a number of folks that have come forward that really love the green space in the park near them, but the equipment's tired, it's broken, large areas of just grass and nothing else. And many of the communities have really good ideas about what they'd like to see in their parks. Will they have an opportunity to weigh in and suggest and then be part of the planning process for their green space?
Through you, the chair, Mayor McGarry, yes, that is a big part of our intention with the Parks Master Plan, is to really engage the community, our neighborhoods, and gather that information to lay out a comprehensive plan for moving forward and addressing the growth, as well as the current park areas in terms of changing needs. We recognize neighborhoods are changing, our demographics are changing, our cultural and ethnicity is changing as well. So we want to make sure that our plan will adapt to the needs of our community. So,
all right, thank you.
Councillor Adshade.
Thanks, Chair. And I just wanted to, further to what Mayor McGarry said, I just wanted to compliment Shane when we had the PIC at Gwynedd Place Park and Tricia. I couldn't believe how many people showed up, and they're really involved, and really, I'm very impressed with the outcome and about the public consultation process. I thought that was excellent, and I know we have another one tomorrow evening too at Chrysler Park, but just on your point, that was really well done, and the public really got a chance to engage. So.
I have no further questions. Thank you. And we're going to get to the motion. Councillor Leggett, you've got the motion.
I do. Thanks for reminding me, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Devine. Park updates as printed.
See no comments or questions. Okay, sorry. Call a question. All in favor? Motion's carried. And the chair is in favor of that as well. Sarah Austin, Manager of Development Engineering, regarding item 10. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair, members of Council, staff, and the public. In early 2018, the city initiated a corporate service delivery review. As the project manager for that project, I'm here this evening to give you an update on where we stand as we complete the review portion and we transition into implementation. So tonight I'd like to give you, for those of you who aren't aware of the project, a brief review of what the overall scope of it was, along with an overview of the recommendations and the implementation plan. So the corporate service review essentially consisted of 4 key components. The first was the development of a complete comprehensive list of city services. The second was the preparation of standardized profiles for each service. The third piece was the development of recommendations to improve city services. And finally, the development of an implementation plan. The city retained Blackline Consulting to assist us with the first 3 of those items, as well as services for internal clients, i.e. other departments, as well as external clients. The services were grouped based on function and a theme, rather than on the city's organizational structure, which means that the list isn't impacted if we have a reorganization. The list consists of 4 levels, so it begins with 7 programs, which are further broken down into portfolios, and then services, and in some cases, sub-services. The programs were developed, as I mentioned, around themes, and the programs, and in fact most of the list, tries to use words that are common and familiar to council, staff, and the public. So the 7 programs that we've identified are listed here on the screen. Getting Around, which is mainly transportation items. Getting Stuff Done is the things that the city residents deal with the city for the most part. Infrastructure, roads, water, wastewater, parks. Jobs and Growth, development, planning, economic development. Public Safety is fire for the most part, as well as bylaw and building services. Running the city is primarily the city hall functions, so legal, communications, the city manager's office, that type of thing. And things to do are most of the parks and recs aspects fall into that category. Once we had the list complete, we developed, as I mentioned, standard profiles for each service. So this looked at what are the scope or the key tasks associated with each of them. It also looked at who are the stakeholders. Is it the public? Is it another department? And it also defined a legislated service. Is it discretionary? Is it core? Is it critical? Are there service standards? If there are, what are they? What's the delivery model? Do staff do it? Do we contract it out? And also we looked at, are there applicable policies or bylaws that impact the delivery of that service? So once we had all that put together, our consultant took a look and came up with 5 categories of recommendations and opportunities for the city to consider. The 5 categories are opportunities to build a service-oriented culture. So these are using that service list and the profiles and incorporating them into our corporate activities. They've identified 11 key recommendations and another 7 that are well underway by staff. Those are corporate or department-wide initiatives. They've also identified a list of approximately 50 smaller opportunities that they're recommending staff pursue. Those are typically related to a specific division or a very specific process. They've also identified some opportunities that relate to our corporate culture, and those aren't necessarily tied to a service. So we have passed those along to Human Resources, who are currently doing or developing a people plan, and they're going to take those and incorporate that into their final plan. So I'd like to give you just a high-level quick review of the main recommendations. Further details and the analysis that supports these are included in the final reports that were appended to the agenda. So as I mentioned, the first opportunity involves integrating the use of the service list and the service profiles into our corporate activities. So the terms, the service names can be integrated into our communications. They can be used for resource and budget and prioritization discussions. At a program or a portfolio level, they can be tied into our strategic plan and our priorities there. Or the services can be broken down even further into things like our business continuity planning. The second opportunity that's listed is the service-based costing. And that recommendation involves reviewing how we're tracking our costs and planning our budgets and starting to align those with the services instead of our departments or our groups. As with the first recommendation, this approach helps with determining budget and resource allocations. And the third one that's mentioned here, adopt a change management approach, recognizes that the city as a corporation has undergone a lot of change over the last few years. We've had several restructurings, we've had staff retirements, we have a new mayor. We've also had some introduction of some fairly large initiatives, mainly being City One and how that has changed our operations. So recognizing that more change is coming, either through the service delivery review or other corporate initiatives, it's been recommended we look at developing a corporate framework for change management to ensure that we set up the next changes appropriately, we account for training, we engage staff accordingly, and we want to make sure that our changes are successfully implemented. So briefly, here are the 11 recommendations, the key ones that are sort of corporate or department-wide. We'll read them. I won't go into too much detail on them. They involve developing customer experiences or journey mapping, developing a digital corporate strategy, scaling our corporate communications, developing and embedding risk management practices in our city operations, formalizing the city's policy process, insourcing our parking bylaw enforcement, consolidating our coordination of public consultation, implementing day-to-day resource planning, enhancing the city's bylaw review process, augmenting inspection services of city capital projects, and centralizing our facility management. So as with the previous slide, there's additional details in the final report that support these. They give a little more detail as well as the analysis. We also have, as I mentioned, 7 opportunities that are well underway by staff. These came up through our discussions in the service review, and our consultant supported them, recommended they move through to implementation. Some of them you may have heard of or know of, others you may not yet, but they will likely all be coming towards you in the next couple of months as they move forward into implementation. So once our consultant developed our recommendations, staff have also then developed an implementation report to make sure that we can prepare staff and equip them to implement these recommendations. So the implementation report includes 4 different types of action plans. It includes resourcing recommendations, a reporting timeline, as well as a timeline for overall implementation. So the action plans include terms of references that are different levels of detail depending on the category. Those include a recommended project sponsor, a project manager, and in some cases project team members that we feel should be involved in that project. They've also tied the terms of reference to the development of project charters, which would operate through our project management office. And they also identify timing for regular reporting for updates to staff, senior management, and council. So I've been acting as a full-time project manager throughout the service review project so far. However, actually with tonight's presentation, my scope of work is finished, so I will not be involved directly in the implementation phase. So we're recommending that the responsibility for oversight of implementation be assigned to a corporate strategy coordinator. That's a position that reports into the Director of Corporate Strategy, which is in the Corporate Enterprise Department. And we feel that's a really good fit to tie into the overall strategic plan and how these all fit together. The coordinator is not responsible directly for implementation. Instead, they're a resource. They help develop the project charters. They help with any information that the teams need. They provide support. And they'll be the key point on reporting. So they will report on a regular basis to senior management and council on the implementation of the overall plan. We're also recommending that we use the city's annual report to provide a bigger picture on where these are all at. So as I mentioned, each project team will report regularly on their progress. Depending on what the recommendation is, it may become a city capital project. So if that's the case, there'd also be reporting requirements through the project management office, and they report out regularly as well to senior staff and council. So our next steps, as I mentioned, we're transitioning into implementation. In the final report, you'll notice there's a complex calendar. I didn't include it in the presentation because it's pretty little by the time you see it on the slide. Our consultant is recommending we implement over the next 2 years. So they've phased those out. They recognize that they are some larger impacts. They recognize we've gone through some change as well, so they've given us a suggested time frame on how we roll those out. As the projects teams start looking at those, we anticipate they'll revise and update the timeline as we go. In several cases, some of these opportunities have already been identified and included in department work plans for this year, so some of them may already be underway, maybe not yet, but in the near future. Others may have to wait until there's future years, until there's either budget or resources available for them. So that's a high-level update on where we're at on the corporate service review. As I said, we finished the review, we're transitioning into implementation. Are there any questions on the project?
Thank you, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sarah, this is really good, and I wouldn't have expected less from you. And I really appreciate the work that you do for the city, and having worked with you in the past. I'm wondering if there could be some sort of a legend that explains when you do abbreviations or acronyms, because I haven't got a clue what HEAT stands for, BI,
okay.
Yep. So I think that would be better for the reader. I went through this. I haven't had time to really go into it to the depth that I would like to do, but I have gone through this, and I want the opportunity to do that more. What's an intelligence tool?
Certainly. So through the chair, so intelligence tools start to get into essentially digital tracking. So things like we can put sensors on streetlights to tell you when something goes out, or you can monitor levels in a tank or something like that. So it's essentially using digital things to help monitor remotely and gather information.
Okay, so excuse me, Mr. Chair, another follow-up to that. So are we looking at a new software program to go into our SAP on top of what we already have?
So through the chair, a lot of the recommendations on specific pieces will be up to staff to take a look at and review what we currently have. Are there benefits to changing a system, and then developing a plan to do that. So it's not something we'd be looking at changing overnight. We'd be looking at incorporating that into a bigger picture, or are there opportunities with the software we have perhaps to utilize it in a different manner. So those are why we've sort of indicated they're for staff to pursue. They're things that either are a best management practice or our consultant has identified they think we could benefit from, but it's ultimately staff to identify does it make sense or not, and then how do we work that in. So it may be part of a bigger technology answer or digital strategy on some of the software, or it may be a change in how we do a process. So they're not a guarantee they're going to move forward. We'll have to review a little further and get staff's input.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Sarah, you did a wonderful job. Thank you. You really did, all 183 pages of it.
Did you read that?
Well, I did my best, okay? And I must say, you're extremely talented, but might take me a little while to get my head around it, okay? All right, but you've done an excellent job, and we haven't seen you for months, so now we know what you've been doing.
There you go. Yep.
All right? Thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Mayor McGarry.
Yeah, thank you very much. I echo Council's expressions of delight at what you have put across here. It was very well organized, and I very much appreciate it. Just a quick question just on follow-up, and you said the implementation phase was potentially over a couple of years should this be adopted. Are there priorities in each of these sections as to what would be the kind of order of things to implement, or priorities in each section, so that council would have a better roadmap of how to move forward?
Certainly. So through the chair, one of the final pages in the implementation report has a timeline, and they've been indicated in there based on what our consultant thinks is a good priority list. So they have focused on, I think, 2 or 3 that they're recommending should be the first couple, and I'm not going to lie, I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. So the one is looking, starting with the service-based costing, because it's not something that will happen overnight, so it's something to sort of start to look at. The other 2 relate to some of the resource planning and some of the communication services aspects. So they feel those are ones that are high priorities for us. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to adhere to that. Some of that is what are our resources that are available to us. For example, we had a digital strategy was a little bit higher. Given some of the recent staff changes, that one may may move down a little bit on the chain just until they're fully resourced again. So it's a guideline, and we can certainly adjust depending on if council has a priority or departments already focused on some aspects of them.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. As Councillor Devine has said, it's going to take a while to digest this. Would it be a problem if we didn't pass this tonight, if we put it off for a few weeks to the next council meeting, like a week?
So through the chair, I'm going to ask for input from, so we brought it just for information tonight. So at this point, it's being provided for info. It's not necessarily looking to be adopted. If there are any recommendations in here that result in a budget requirement or a change in the level of service or a new policy, those would come back to council on an individual basis that you could look at more detail, more explanation, the impacts, that type of thing.
Okay. So if we pass it tonight, since it is just for information,
it's been received.
You would still be available to answer any questions or anything that we have on it?
Yep.
So, okay, thank you.
No further questions. I echo the comments. That was an outstanding report. A lot to go through, and I'm looking forward to seeing it implemented. So we've got the motion, Councillor Devine. I'll let you table that.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused here in the sense that we're saying we're passing it, but it's just for information. I'll make the motion here, okay? This is myself and Councillor Liggett, Corporate Service Delivery Review Update. That report 19-135 CRS Corporate Service Delivery Review Update be received for information. Now, I'd like to be able to speak in this last, reserved to speak in this last. My concern is there's 183 pages here. Some of it's technical information. Now, I do have a bit of a technical background, but it's going to take me a while to get my head around this. All right, there's references in here to contract and workout. There's your references in here for moving stuff around. I would really like to get a 30-day deferral on this so all council can get their head around it. Now, I understand, received for information, I get that, but it's 183 pages that I would like to see deferred until the next general committee meeting. And any questions we have, we can raise them at that time. Okay, I believe I have a seconder for deferral here.
Just a comment, it is just to receive for information, and staff can meet with councillors individually to answer their questions.
Yeah, we could do that, but again, there's some specifics in here that have raised a couple flags for me, such as contracting some work out. All right, because if that work gets contracted out, it will never come back to council. It will never ever come back to council.
Nothing's being approved, but I do have Councillor Liggett who wants to speak, and for the deferral.
Say that I'm that I was seconding the deferral.
So
Okay, here's an example.
we could put the deferral on the floor and then debate time. later.
Yeah, because there's some things I'm concerned about. Explore the use of third-party contractors to select operation services, road maintenance, et cetera, horticultural maintenance. That's one. Okay, the gap. Well, I'm not as concerned with the gap, but there's just a few in here, and that because if this gets contracted out, we would never come back to council. So that's concerning. Again, you've done a great job. I'm not trying to blow holes through, but I think we all need to read it and digest it, and any concerns that we have, then we need to raise them. So I'm asking for a deferral until the next general committee meeting.
So I do have others. Okay, so we've heard that. I do got other speakers, which I'm going to allow. I just want to emphasize, we're not approving anything. It's a plan, basically, which can be adjusted as we go along. But Councillor Liggett?
No, I'm trying to get rid of the...
Okay, Councillor Reid, I'll let you speak.
I would like question to staff as to if we were to defer it, what effect would it have upon this particular project? If there's someone who could answer that.
We could get someone to answer that.
So through the chair, I don't know that it has an impact. As I mentioned, my scope was to bring it to the point of finalizing the implementation report. The next piece is to transition it to the corporate strategy coordinator, which is an approved position without a body in it quite yet. So there is a bit of a delay as that position gets filled. So there is an opportunity to come back with other questions. As I mentioned, we're not looking for approval. Anything that would have impacts to service levels, budget impacts, anything like that would come back either through this year's capital and operating budget process or looking for approval of any new policies or anything like that. So there's no immediate impacts, but I guess that would be my answer.
Follow up then?
You may.
Well, it seems to me that we should just receive this report. We're not making any recommendations. We're not taking any action. We're just receiving the report, and if anyone has any questions around it, they have the opportunity to go to Sarah or anyone else who's involved in the report and ask for the information and deal with it. Because there's no action involved, it doesn't make sense to me then to defer it. If there was an action, yes, it would make sense, but there isn't. All there is that we are receiving a report, a very concise, important report. I was very excited when I read it.
Mr. Chair, should this not be just time and place?
It's not.
It's a deferral. Deferral. Should it
Yeah,
not
if
be
we
time and
could
place?
stick to the deferral, that would be great.
Yeah, time and place.
So time and place.
Is the referral on the
Yes.
floor?
The deferral's on the floor.
Deferral's on the floor.
Okay.
Time and place.
We have a mover and a seconder for the deferral.
Well, I'm speaking because you gave me permission to do so, but I can stop now.
Yeah, and I do want to allow a little bit of latitude here, okay? Councilor Montero?
I'm fine with the report, and I had a look at it, but there is a lot to digest in here. And I'll have to ask a question from Sarah if I'm allowed.
I'll allow the question.
Thank you. Would that slow you down on what you're doing now for the next stage of what you're going to do? Even for 2 or 3 weeks?
Sorry, through the chair, I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Hardy would like to make a comment?
Maybe just to help the discussion. The purpose of tonight was simply to share with council and the public around some of the initiatives that staff are doing in terms of administration within the city. What we've heard over the last number of years, especially around the budget time, is how effective are we using taxpayer dollars, and what are we doing towards making our corporation administratively more effective. So for the past 14 months, Sarah's been working on this service review, and tonight we're just bringing it forward to not only council but to our public to indicate there are some initiatives, many of which are underway, and staff are working through those recommendations, again, to provide a more efficient and effective administration of our city. And so it is simply to share with you those internal operations that we are carrying out and to share that information. There was no requirement for an action. We weren't looking for an endorsement. We were simply sharing information. Hopefully that maybe clarifies with some of the discussion.
Councilor Montero, time and place?
No, I'm done.
Councilor Devine, time and place?
Next general committee meeting.
I got no further speakers. We're going to vote on the deferral. All those in favor? And those opposed? I'll allow the deferral. I'll vote in favor for the deferral until that meeting. Will carry. So for the consent agenda, we've got Councillor Reid by Councillor Leggett requested that we pull item 11 out. I'll let you put the consent on, Councillor Reid.
Yes, I have the consent agenda moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Devine. Everything except item 11.
All those in favor? That will carry. And Councillor Leggett, you've got item 11.
I don't have the motion in front of me, but I would like to make an amendment to the housekeeping motion here. What is missing from this is what was in the original one, and that is that, I'll read it to you, that the Integrity Commissioner shall give a copy of the final report to the complainant and the member whose conduct is concerned 15 days prior to the council meeting at which it will be considered. So the way it is written now, the complainant and the member would never see the final report. It would just come into open session of council. The way it had been written originally when in 2017 was that final report was to come to the complainant and the member 15 days prior to the council meeting at which it would be held in open session.
My understanding is the change was just a housekeeping measure to do with council having permission to get a ruling from the Integrity Commissioner about whether or not we have a conflict. That's all this is about.
Well, is this not, sorry, Mr. Chair, but is this not supposed to come back before us once a year for review?
So the review is a different issue. Do we know when it's going to come back? We probably don't at this time. It could be direction to the clerk to have that part come back to council for approval. So we deal with the Integrity Commissioner tonight, and then we end up getting the report to come back to council for the rest of the code of conduct as part of that annual review.
Okay, so when it says here that this is also to append to report 19 to be updated to reflect this change, and the code of conduct is attached to us, if we just do it for housekeeping, then it goes through as is. My concern is that, one concern I have is that I don't remember that ever coming before us for housekeeping to be changed in the first place. And I have a concern that I want to know when this is coming back. Like if we don't make that amendment to this now, I think that's a very important change, and I think that that should be amended.
Thank you, Councillor Leggett. My understanding is that we are working on finding a date for it to come back. The reason for this part about the housekeeping measure is because of the change to the Municipal Act, so it came back for that reason. But there still is a course where it's got to go through its full course and come back to council another time for what you'd be referred to and any other changes that council might want to make.
Do we have an idea of when that is?
We're working on it right now. We don't have a date.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Devine?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I don't think coming up with an answer, we don't have a date, is acceptable, to be quite honest with you. This is very, very important. All right? That's the way this reads right now, and I agree with Councillor Leggett. I'm not sure when this came out or when it was changed, and we may have missed it. We may have missed it. Right now it reads, the Integrity Commissioner shall provide a copy of the draft report to the complainant and members subject to the investigation within 20 days of the due date. Okay? Draft report. Keywords, draft report. So you could get a draft report 20 days prior to, and the final report will be different than the draft report. We need to deal with this, and we need to deal with it quickly. Because anybody that's on the hot seat, okay, they need that report, and if they have to get that report and go get lawyers' advice after they get the report, as opposed to being put on the hot seat without lawyers' advice, that is wrong. That is absolutely 100% wrong. So I would like to know when it's coming back, and if not, I'd be quite happy to second Councillor Leggett's motion to deal with it now. And understand we would need 2/3, I believe. Or get a date when it's coming back, and I would hope that it will come back in the next 30 days. Because this clearly was an oversight on our part. Clearly. Because getting a draft report and getting a final report are two entirely different things. Because the draft report and the final report will not say the same thing.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. I don't have an exact date. All I've got is the next couple of months. We would have to talk to the clerk to get an exact date. And we could defer it if you'd like to put that as an option, so we can do that.
Get on the mic. Okay, thanks. Yeah, we can defer it if you wish, and I understand it was, the integrity commissioner that was put in there for this particular application, but in reading this became quite glaring to me as well. So, if I'm gonna ask the city manager and the clerk's office to bring this back within 30 days and make that change that we asked for.
And I just want to make it clear, Councillor Devine and the rest of council, that it was in good faith, because with the integrity commissioner,
Oh, I
the
get that.
sooner
I get
that
it.
council has access to that, the better, right?
Well,
And
that's important.
what this was about.
That's important. But this to me is glaring. The fact that I read it yesterday, it jumped out in my face.
So do I have a mover and seconder for the deferral?
Sure. Sure. Well, it's either deferral or direction to staff. Take your pick.
Or we could do direction to staff.
Well, I think direction to staff, and we'll bring it back within 30 days.
We'll take that. That'll be fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Non-jurisdictional items. Notice of motion.
Hang on, do we pass this?
That was direction.
Direction, okay, that's fine.
Other business. Well, I would just like to say very briefly that as all of us feel, I was very saddened to hear the news about the passing of former Councillor Rick Castle,
This wasn't passed.
who I had the opportunity to serve with for 4 years, and we sat beside each other around the horseshoe. And I always remember Rick as being very passionate about Hesper. He always had Hesper's back, and he cared about the whole city, and he had a lot of vision, and he was always very helpful to me whenever I needed help transitioning into my role as a councillor. So I just want to remember him this evening, and his legacy will live on. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Adshade.
Yes. Thanks, Chair. Move myself and second by Councillor Wolf. That the general committee meeting is now adjourned at 8:50 or 8:48.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
I know. That was close. Yeah, I guess we could not, because that's not possible. We could phone him. We could phone him up though and get advice from him. Yeah.
I'm sure they could. Nobody's been charged.
No, not